Greetings, nerds. For those new to the channel, I'm a paint formulator. This is my primary job. What that means is that I make paints for a living. I design and do all the chemistry for paints. So when I talk about these things, I'm speaking from a point of authority of knowing better, and I'm cutting through the marketing bullshit. Now, AK is very prone to doing a lot of bad marketing stunts, and saying a lot of poor things in marketing. And I wanted to go through a bunch of things before you actually buy this product, because this product isn't necessarily a bad product. I don't know because I haven't used it. However, a lot of what it says in here, I'm going to debunk because there's a lot of stupid things that are said in here. Let's start off with this sentence here. Gouache is a type of water-based paint, so it can be considered an acrylic. It is not an acrylic. An acrylic has to use an acrylic resin, aka acrylic binder. This is the vehicle it uses. A gouache, because they also say in here it can be water reactivated, this means it's going to be using either Aquazol or it's using gum arabic. It is not an acrylic at all. Do not call it an acrylic. There is an acrylic gouache, and they cannot be water reactivated. That is the big thing here. They don't know what they're talking about. And if you Google AI this stuff, there's such a confusion that AI sometimes will call it an acrylic. This sounds like it was written by AI or by someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, or someone who knows what they're talking about and knows how to manipulate their own customer bases. Because honestly, the majority of mini painters, no offense, are pretty stupid when it comes down to this stuff, and they will believe any marketing bullet point possible. I've heard so many stupid things coming from their mouths, like hobby paints have smaller particle sizes, to hobby paints are higher technology, when they're not in the slightest. Now, there's also a couple more problematic things in here. They have nothing to do with third-gen acrylics. That is true. They have nothing to do with third-gen acrylics. Their finish is totally different, as they have much more pigment load. Gouache is supposed to be around 65% binder and water to pigment ratio. Somewhere around there. Sometimes it can go up to a magical 50%. But it's rarely higher than that. In some pigments, you can see upwards of 63%, but that's about it. And that gouache is going to not be very good, and it's going to be mostly chalk. You don't see colored pigment with that. Because of this, their appearance is much more similar to oil colors. They are not similar in the slightest to an oil color. A gouache is a very matte paint because of all the chalk you're adding to it. It is, if you haven't watched some of my previous videos, I talk about pigmentation and how high pigmentation does not mean opacity. And I prove that by using a very transparent pigment, and I go over 70% pigment to binder, and it's still a transparent paint. It just didn't work as a paint at that point, but it was still transparent. If your oil paint is matte, do not use this oil paint. It means a lot of negative things, like a lot of filler, a lot of archival problems are going to pop up from it. It's not going to be a pleasant experience. It means it's a low quality paint. Now, let's go over to their other slide here. Because there's some more problematic things that I've encountered on here. They're really pushing the acrylic weathering gouache really hard here. It's not an acrylic, unless they're lying about it water reactivating. Gum arabic, stuff like that. Now, there is a way to make a water reactivated acrylic, but that's not something good. That means that humidity and moisture can actually reactivate it as well. Unlike with watercolors where they really don't get reactivated like that. You can technically do it by adding in gum arabic to a acrylic binder, but that's also not always true of gum arabic. Gum arabic is used a lot in house paint as a thickening agent. There's better and more useful ones these days, but in cheaper, very cheap house paint, you can see a level of gum arabic in there for thickening agent. Now, here's another thing that actually caught my eye. AK Gouache paints can be applied over conventional acrylics, enamels, and oil paints. They cannot be applied over oil paints at all at any point. They are water-based, which means they will delaminate and they will not have a surface to adhere on. In fact, a normal gouache will not adhere very well to plastic at all, unlike their claims here. A normal gouache, if I have to make a second video showing gouache out and showing what it can actually go over, I will gladly do that. In fact, I might do that just because, just to remove anyone's doubt in what I'm saying here. And I'm very confident in these findings. And it can't really go for enamels. Enamels sometimes are oil-based, sometimes they're water-based, sometimes they're solvent-based acrylic. An enamel, it doesn't really have a meaning anymore, thanks to DuPont in the 1960s where they sort of changed it. It used to be a solvent-based oil paint that had an alkyd acrylic in there. And now it can mean anything from high gloss, but you also have matte enamels now, which those are just typically a solvent-based, like a isopropyl alcohol based thing with nitrocellulose in it. That's a very common enamel these days. Now, that them saying that it can go over oil paint is a big problem because it cannot. That is perpetuating a stereotype of many painters who try to put water-based acrylics over oil paints and then find that they rub off really easily because they don't adhere to the surface at all. And no, you can't just blast a hairdryer at the oil paint and then paint over it with acrylics. That doesn't work that way. You'll actually cause more problems down the road. It's not very archival. Archival meaning that it will not last very long. It's not something that it will look good for that competition for that day, but a month down the road, you're going to see cracking and a lot of delamination issues. Sometimes it can even take longer than that. Sometimes it can take up to 5 years to even see cracking and stuff like that because the cracks are so small a lot of the time you just don't notice it. And if it's in a not a well-ventilated room, you will not see much air movement crossing paths on it to where the air is pushing the acrylic off the oil paint. I've seen this personally in museums because a lot of artists have tried this over the years. In fact, if AK found out a way to put water-based acrylics over oil paint or even gouache over oil paint, this would not be something that is limited to a hobby. This is a multi-trillion-dollar investment that a lot of companies would be doing. They'd be trying to buy AK if this was actually possible. This is something I have to bring up because one problem you see in the house coatings industry is we're using a lot of water-based polymers now, a lot of water-based acrylics now for house paint. And it has problems going over old house paint because it's oil-based. So you have to go find oil-based house paint, which has higher VOCs, takes longer to dry, and overall, not many companies are still producing it. So saying that you can put these things over oil paint when larger companies who invest billions of dollars into this and are looking for a solution don't have one, can't have one, and you're coming out with like $1 million of an investment in it, maybe. Paints are a massive multi-billion-dollar industry, multi-trillion-dollar industry globally. It's not as simple as people think it is. The other big catch here that I see is that they can easily be diluted with tap water, and you should never be using tap water to mix in your paints. It can discolor, it can cause mold, it can cause bacterial growths, it can cause a lot of other problems. Yeah, it's the simple solution, it's the quick solution, but it's not archival, and it's actually something a paint company should not be recommending. They should, instead of remove tap water and just have water there, this would not be as big of a problem. People are still going to use tap water, but them recommending tap water in a paint, and I've used their acrylics that do not have the correct pH for an acrylic paint and will have archival issues in the long run because of them not having the correct pH, not having the correct layer biocides, meaning that they will mold over because they're water based. And this is a huge concern with water based materials. Gouache, fun fact, will mold over really easily. Same with watercolors if you're not careful or if you use tap water with them. This has been a long-standing problem with watercolor and gouache as well. So, something to keep in mind. They also say something on here prior to applying AK Gouache paint, simply clean the surface to be painted using soap and water. That's to remove your hand oils, remove the dirt, remove the grime, which can prevent paint adherence. But if you're doing soap and water over an oil paint, you need to wait like a month before you can even do that. Technically speaking, some pigments you can do it after a week, but ideally you need to wait a month to do that. And once again, you can't just put a hair dryer over that. The off gassing is going to be a problem of the oil paint still. They dry off exothermic reaction after all. So, I will say I don't think these are going to be very good. They're €4 for a 20 mil gouache. I think they're going to be mostly chalk. I mean, their main acrylic line is mostly chalk as well, but that's neither here nor there when it comes down to it. The reality of it is just kind of I don't think these are going to be very high quality gouaches. I would not use them as an artist at all. I'd stick to a good gouache, a high quality gouache from like Schmenke. And if you are looking for something like this, you will pay more money for something like Schmenke gouache, but you'll get a better experience. You'll have a more enjoyable time with it. It's not going to be overloaded with chalk. It's going to still be just as matte, but it's going to be more colorful, more vibrant. You're going to see better grinds in the pigments as well. You're going to see just better weathering techniques as a whole. I am not denying gouache as a weathering technique for tanks or anything of that nature. I use gouache. I use watercolors as well for weathering techniques. My painting's not very good, but I still use all of these different things and I varnish over it. Just because the watercolor is going to rub off. It doesn't adhere very well to plastic, that's what an acrylic paint is plastic. So just keep that in mind before you buy these. A lot of the marketing here is just completely bad, and there's a lot of incorrect information in here that just you can disprove really easily by a simple Google search, like putting these paints over oil paint. Or you could just listen to me and someone who actually knows what they're talking about in this hobby. Very few people do listen to me, but it is an option. Anyways, that's all. As I said, I'm not saying whether or not to buy these or not. It's more of know your facts before you do buy something like this. It's not going to be a magical solution like they're going to claim.